Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Beckner. I'm Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning in Parkway. Really appreciate you taking the time either this evening or at a later date when we post this webinar online to take a chance to learn more about Virtual Campus for the 21-22 school year. Before we get started, I want to thank all parents who are joining us tonight. We know that the last year has been challenging and difficult. Our students and our teachers have risen to the occasion and done amazing work, but we certainly know that they couldn't do that work without you, without the support of their families. And I know many of you have put in tons of effort to ensure that your kids are successful in school. So thank you so much for all your support, your patience, your help, and the ways that you have really gone above and beyond for your children this year. We are excited to offer multiple learning environments and choices for our families for next year and into the future. And so we're really grateful that you're taking the time to learn more tonight. So thank you so much. Tonight we are doing a Zoom Q&A, and that means that we're recording tonight's video so that people who are not able to attend live can still access the same information later. And then any questions that were submitted, we will be posting a Q&A on the Parkway website so that you and anyone else who's interested can access the questions and answers. Anything that was submitted after noon today, even if it doesn't make it into the webinar tonight, we'll make it into that document that is posted so that everyone can see those questions and answers. I'm joined tonight by Dr. Jennifer Stanfill, and I will let Jennifer introduce herself.
Thank you, Dr. Beckner. My name is Jennifer Stanfill. I serve Parkway as the Director of Choice Programs, and I am just thrilled and so excited to be part of the launch of Parkway Virtual Campus.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. The purpose of tonight is really to give families an additional opportunity besides what we've already published to learn more about Virtual Campus and our planning for next school year. We also know, and we'll go through our timeline here momentarily, but we know that you received the enrollment form earlier this week. But we want to make sure that we provide as much information as possible as you're determining your enrollment. Because that enrollment form is live, many questions you'll find are enrollment dependent, which means there's a big difference, for example, between 100 middle school students enrolling in Virtual Campus and 500 middle school students enrolling. So even though those questions are enrollment dependent, we are going to do as best we can to answer as many questions as possible so that you can make the most informed decision that you can possibly make for your child or your children as far as their enrollment for next year goes. So tonight our agenda is we're going to cover the timeline. We're going to cover the structure of Virtual Campus. We'll address staffing and just making sure you know what's going on with your teachers and those sorts of issues. We'll address scheduling and schedules at all levels. And then we'll talk about student and staff expectations. So our timeline, as I mentioned previously, earlier this week, enrollment forms were sent to families on April 6th. If you did not receive that, please reach out to us so we can make sure that you get that form and can complete it. The enrollment form is due on April 18th. After the 18th, if you figure out for some reason something has changed and need to make a change up until May 2nd, you can request a change in that enrollment up until May 2nd. We have had parent submitted questions, and thank you to everybody who took the time to submit questions and answers. Basically our format tonight, we'll go through the information that we've already provided, but then we will also in each section address parent submitted questions. So here was a parent submitted question, and this was a popular one around our timeline. Why can't we switch to in-person or to virtual during the school year of 21-22? And really the biggest reason is we want to make sure that all students, regardless of if they are virtual or in-person, have balanced class sizes and high quality teachers. And that means that we have to ensure that as we create schedules and as we hire staff and as we do the work of making sure that students are in the right classes for next school year, that we do that work on the front end. The example would be if 20 students say that they want virtual in 6th grade, let's say, and during the course of the school year, we let 15 of those students change, that would overcrowd our in-person classes and then leave us with a staff member only teaching 5 students, which is certainly not the most effective use of our resources. So we really want to make sure that students can get those good class sizes with high quality teachers. The only way to do that is to make sure that we have the information now so that we can hire the appropriate staff for next school year. Now to talk about our structure for virtual campus is Dr. Stanfield.
Thank you, Dr. Buckner. So I am going to kind of follow the same process. We're going to go over some information about structure and then answer a number of questions that have been submitted by parents. So virtual campus is really a standalone online school where students can expect to have kids from all of our Parkway schools in their classes. Attendance will be taken daily, similar to this year, and students will be expected to attend all scheduled class sessions, and those will be synchronous in nature. So live teaching and learning, as those of you that may be in virtual campus right now have experienced thus far. Can you advance my slide, Dr. Beckner? Thank you. So we are encouraging our younger grades, especially kindergarten and first grade, to select an in-person experience. And really that is based upon feedback from our teachers and some of our parents due to the higher level of assistance needed with the learning process. However, we are going to be offering kindergarten and first grade virtual campus for families who still choose that option. One important thing is that our high school students will be able to continue to participate in athletics and activities at their home high schools. And so they will remain dual enrolled for that purpose. But ultimately, as a student and a family, you all will have a very streamlined experience and a cohesive Parkway Virtual Campus experience and community. So a couple of questions. One was around students with IEPs and whether or not virtual campus could accommodate those students who may have IEPs or individualized learning plans. And so in that case, we absolutely can meet the needs of our students who have IEPs, and we will work to coordinate services as defined based on student need. Another question was just around whether or not children will remain connected to their home schools. And so while we will kind of have that streamlined community feel within virtual campus, and we're really excited about that, we will be having our own events, celebrations, honor roll, awards. At the same time, our middle and high school students in particular will be able to be connected with their middle schools and high schools in order to participate in athletics and activities. There was a question regarding elementary students and whether or not they would have the same curriculum as in-person students. And so it's important to note that we will continue to offer the guaranteed Parkway curriculum. We will continue to have all of our elementary students participating in specials such as music, art, strings, PE, gifted, all of those different pieces will be integrated into the virtual campus next year. So we had a question just around the structure and how we can offer more hands-on projects in, instead of video watching or recordings of teachers. And so we, as you all can imagine, in the last year, our teachers have learned a tremendous amount about teaching and learning online, and they are continuing to do that same thing. And so we have a staff dedicated to supporting our virtual teachers and to support learning online. And so we will continue to work with our teachers on that. It is also important that if you ever have specific concerns that you would reach out to either your child's administrator or to me. It's one of those situations where if we don't know there's a problem, it's difficult for us to address it. So, but ultimately, we are consistently looking for ways to engage our students in creative ways online. So this is just a bit of a follow-up to the K-1 recommendation. And so we do anticipate in the coming years that there will be a lot of research about students learning online, particularly our younger learners. But as I mentioned before, this recommendation really is coming from our students and from our parents. And so as you all can imagine, in those younger classrooms, kindergarten and first grade especially, there's a lot of social development and interaction with students, physical activities. And while we can create really meaningful learning experiences for our kids, it's difficult to replicate some of those things, like teaching students to share, for example, in a virtual environment. But again, we do understand that there are families that really enjoy and appreciate the online learning experience, and that is why we will continue to offer virtual campus at kindergarten and first grade. So a couple questions came through around social interaction and how we keep our kids connected. And so we will continue to have our own community and identity as previously mentioned, and we will have dedicated staff members and counselors who will be working to really develop opportunities for students to socialize with others online. We will likely have clubs and activities that are operating virtually, and teachers will continue to really design learning experiences that allow for student collaboration throughout their day. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Beckner to talk about staffing.
Well, thank you so much. So, of course, we had the question earlier about whether students will remain connected with their home schools. And as we've shared, both families and students should expect to have teachers and classmates from across the district in their classes. So we want to make sure that virtual campus teachers are high quality Parkway staff, that these will be highly developed people who are dedicated to online learning. Many of them will have previously taught in Parkway in any of our 18 elementary schools, 5 middle schools, 4 high schools. And we will have dedicated administrative and counseling services. One of the concerns we heard from families and teachers this year is that it was often difficult to know who exactly to contact, particularly in those classes where there might be students from multiple home schools. So we will be streamlining that process to ensure that as a parent of a student in virtual campus, you know who to call, whether that's the counselor, the administrator, or of course the teacher, but that we can have that dedicated support. Because we know that virtual learning, we want the students who are in virtual campus to have as high quality an experience as possible. So we will be streamlining that process with dedicated administrative and counseling support. In terms of parent submitted questions, we did have one, which is essentially, will I still have the same case manager or the same special school district staff who my student has become accustomed to in their home school? And the answer is, while we'll have continuity of services, ensuring that your child who has an IEP does receive what they need based on their IEP, it may be different people who are delivering those services. There will be special school district staff dedicated to virtual campus, but those individuals just might be different than who you became accustomed to working with in your home school. And again, we'll have those dedicated administrators and counselors who will get to know the IEP, who will get to know your child, and really can support them and their needs. In the elementary school, we want to talk a little bit about the schedule. We will have a similar daily schedule to this year, which is school begins at 8:30 a.m., ends at 3:30 p.m., and the day will become comprised of both synchronous and asynchronous instructions. While Dr. Stanfield mentioned the majority of that instruction will be synchronous, we know that kids also need breaks from the screen, and that'll include physical activity, physical education, that those times when they need to just walk away and they need to be physically active, we will continue to have those in the schedule. In middle school, we will continue to have a mirrored schedule. And by that, we mean classes still begin at the same start and end times as our in-person schools. And we will see a combination of both block scheduling and traditional schedules. So in the block schedules, you will see 50 minutes of live instruction, and then about a half an hour, a little bit more of asynchronous, independent, small group work. We do have a team of people in the middle school who are finalizing that schedule. And so we'll have more details coming soon. But we will, if we have an advisory or a time when students can really connect with sort of a homeroom kind of feel, virtual campus would certainly have that time as well. On traditional days, you'll see 20 to 30 minutes of live instruction. And by traditional days, we mean if there's 8 periods in the school day, that they go 1 through 8, beginning at the beginning of the school day and ending at the end. There will be 15 to 25 minutes of asynchronous or independent or small group work. And in that small group work, that would mean teachers interacting with students, making sure that they understand, working with students who may just need some individual attention. At the high school, we will also see a mirrored schedule where students start at the same beginning time of 7:30, 7:35 actually, end at 2:15. We may see at the high school level that synchronous time begin or end a little bit later than the period start time. As with the middle school, we have a team of teachers who are finalizing that schedule right now and determining the specific start, end times, and all those complexities of how to schedule lunch and the pieces that are important to kids and teachers. But as with the middle school, we will see a combination of block scheduling and traditional scheduling. So in a block schedule, you can expect to see 45 to 50 minutes of live instruction. Certainly if those blocks are 90 minutes, that would extend longer up to potentially 70 minutes of live instruction. Then again, small group, independent work. And on traditional days, we'll see that shorter amount of time dedicated to synchronous instruction with teachers really working with students to support their needs. And relatedly, we had a parent submit a question about learning support time. Learning support time is time built into the class block where teachers can work with students who may need additional help or have questions. We have heard really good feedback about learning support being built into the learning block, particularly during our virtual classes. So on block schedule days, students will have time built into each learning block for that instruction, intervention, and learning support because we know that particularly with online learning, having that time built in where students know that they can connect with their teachers and receive that additional support is certainly very helpful. Another question was very specific. Will engineering be offered for virtual campus? And the answer is at the middle school, we will have the same course offerings in both virtual campus and in the in-person settings. At the high school level, we are offering virtual campus as part, or I'm sorry, offering engineering as part of the virtual campus course guide. But regardless of what the course is, all school offerings are really dependent on how many students sign up. So we might offer it, but if not enough students sign up, then it might not actually fill in the master schedule. So we will certainly be looking closely at how many students sign up for each particular course, whether at the middle or the high school level, to determine if we're able to put that in the master schedule. So student expectations is what I'm going to hand off to Dr. Stanfield.
Thank you. So lots of questions about student expectations, and we've learned a lot about our students as they have become online learners. And so, some of our expectations that will be across the board will be that students will be accessing their Schoology course on a regular basis daily and participating in those live video sessions. As we mentioned earlier, attendance will be taken, and it's incredibly important that students are participating in those online learning sessions. We also encourage our students to set up and follow a routine and participate in their classes, reviewing recordings of lessons as needed. So our teachers will continue to post recordings of live synchronous learning. And then really, as we're shifting from a pandemic response to more of a choice program and learning preference for our families, we are going to be asking our students to have their cameras on. We have heard from students, parents, and teachers that it is much easier to engage and build community with others when you can see them and you can see their nonverbals and just have conversations and really get to know one another. So that will contribute to the community in virtual campus. Now, we know that there may be a need for a situation where maybe somebody needs to not have their camera on for one reason or another, and just know that we will be able to work through that with principals, administrators, counselors, etc. So staff expectations. Most of our staff expectations are very similar to what we would expect of our teachers in person. So continuing to design high quality learning, continuing to provide feedback, communicating with families, and building strong relationships. But there are some staff expectations that are really specific to learning in an online environment. So that expectation that there will be synchronous live instruction on a daily basis, and that teachers are using Schoology as a hub for online learning. Even if our students are linking out perhaps to other programs, they should be able to find everything they need in Schoology, and that is great because families then have logins for Schoology as well. We are expecting our teachers to continue that practice of recording and posting those direct instruction videos really for students to review, but also because we know there are technical issues at times. Students might get kicked off the internet and need to come back in and get caught up. And then really being responsive to student needs and working with those dedicated school staff members to help work with our students and problem solve when there might be problems. So a couple of questions. Will all virtual classes be taught by live teachers instead of teachers posting video recordings? And so as previously stated, that is the expectation. There will be asynchronous and independent time for students, but teachers will be available during those times to provide guidance. Now, there may be some pre-recorded videos utilized if our teachers feel like those are really essential in the learning process and possibly in the case of teacher absences, but that should be the exception and not the rule. So we had a question just about how do we ensure virtual bullying is not occurring and Zoom bombers and some of those different pieces and maybe reasons why our students are less comfortable having their cameras on right now. And so virtual bullying and just really digital citizenship is going to be incredibly important in virtual campus, and the dedicated administrators and counselors will really assist in ensuring that that is not occurring and taking care of it when it does. And as Zoom has been releasing new security features, we are working closely with our technology department to really implement those features and further protect our students. To really minimize those occurrences. And so we will continue to do that. And we will continue to just work with our students about being engaged. It's difficult for students at times to not be in different tabs, accessing videos and other websites, but really working closely with our students, building that community and relationship so they really want to be part of class.
So we did have some parent submitted questions that didn't fall nicely into one of our other categories. One was, will in-person learners continue to maintain face coverings and other protocols? Really, basically, will our in-person children continue to be safe and follow those same practices? So we will maintain our current health and safety protocols until such time as the CDC, St. Louis County health officials tell us it's safe to relax such precautions. So we'll certainly be in contact with and communicating with our local health officials, as well as following the developments at the national level to ensure that our students are as safe as they need to be. We had this question, which was, when exactly will all children in Parkway schools whose parents want them to be vaccinated get vaccinated? And then additional questions about, FDA and CDC and logistics and availability. So the big thing here is this is largely outside of Parkway's control. We do have medical nurse offices, nurses on staff who know how to give vaccines. We have actually applied to be a vaccination site, but we have been turned down in large part because we're an educational institution, not a healthcare institution. There's no pharmaceutical company that will give or sell vaccines to Parkway directly as an organization. So we really have to wait to partner with another company or an outside organization. The St. Louis Health Department has told us that they can't work with us directly because we don't have enough staff to be vaccinated. So we certainly understand that a lot of families want their children to be vaccinated and are looking to Parkway for how can you help us with that. We continue to look for those opportunities. Just know that currently those opportunities are not available. So we are going to have it looks like we have plenty of time for a little bit of question and answer, but just so we all know, next up, we will post these webinars to our Parkway website, and we will also post an updated FAQ document, and we will make sure that all families have access to that in the coming days. But now I want to introduce our coordinator of innovation and library media, Bill Bass, who has graciously agreed to serve as our Q&A moderator tonight.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. As the questions have come in, there's some that have already been answered, so I'm not going to take the time in our session tonight because they've already been addressed. But just know that all of these questions will be part of an FAQ that will be added to the virtual campus website, so you will be able to reference these later. So our first question that was not addressed already tonight is, can siblings have different choices when it comes to virtual or in-person learning selection? So if one student would be successful in virtual and one student might not be as successful, is that possible?
Absolutely. We know that different students have different needs, even within the same family. So when you received the email on April 6th with the information to register for next school year, you should have received a separate email for each student in your household. So certainly you could pick virtual for one student, in person for another student. Again, because we know that not just because they live in the same household does not mean that every student is the same. Different students might have a different learning preference and a different way that they are most successful. And we certainly want to honor that.
Perfect, thank you. Second question, and this is more of a scheduling question for you. What type of criteria will we be using to set up virtual classes? Are we going to try to keep kids from the same school in the same virtual classroom, or will they be from across the district?
Yeah, students and teachers should expect that in a class, there will be students from across Parkway schools. Just practically speaking, it won't be possible to group together all students from one school, all students from another school. Even so far in the responses we're seeing, we know that it's really a number of students from across the district who are requesting virtual campus, rather than being enough students from each school to be able to group them by school. So if you select virtual campus, you should expect that there will be both teachers and students from other schools in each of your classes.
Great, thank you. This question you kind of talked about already, but I think it's worth repeating about COVID protocols for next year and just what kind of safety mechanisms we're putting in place, and specifically for all grade levels, but thinking about our younger students as well, those kindergarten kids, are they able to, with masks and social distancing and things like that? Can you just kind of talk about that?
Certainly. As I mentioned, we will continue to have the same health and safety protocols we have now in place until the CDC and St. Louis County come back and tell us that we can relax those protocols. Of course, we all want to know exactly what will school look like on the first day of August of next school year. And the unfortunate reality is, just like you, we don't know either what the health and safety situation will be in our community at that time. And we can't say specifically that these are the things we know St. Louis County will recommend or that the CDC will recommend. We've all probably seen that the CDC guidance continues to change as the health situation changes. So we will be, essentially, we're going to err on the side of caution, which is we will keep in place the same protocols that we have now with universal masking, distance to the degree possible, cleaning of surfaces, hand washing, all those sorts of things. We will keep those in place until the CDC and St. Louis County tell us that we no longer have to have those in place.
Thank you. One question that we have is about the 10-day absence rule from the school district. And can you talk about if somebody plans to travel and they are in virtual learning, why that would be an issue if they are going to be gone more than those 10 days.
Yeah, certainly. So for those who aren't aware, we do require, because of how funding and education and school districts work in both Missouri and nationwide, that students live in our school district to be able to attend virtual campus or any physical Parkway school. We do have students who from time to time travel or leave the district for an extended period. And our practice has been if a student leaves the country or leaves the school district for 10 or more days, they are dropped from our enrollment and then have to re-enroll when they return to the school district. This year, given COVID, given that we knew we had some students who in fact had traveled overseas during spring break of last school year, who got stuck in the country that they were visiting and weren't able, because of travel restrictions, to come back to the United States and come back to Parkway. We didn't want those students to be penalized because that was something outside of their control. So we allowed those students this year to remain enrolled and continue learning virtually. The challenge became, and still is for many of our teachers, that because of the time zone differences, those students couldn't participate in synchronous learning often. Those students often couldn't access the same kinds of education that their peers were getting, just because we are focusing on live synchronous instruction from our teachers. They simply weren't able to participate to the same degree. So beginning next school year, we will reinstitute that 10-day rule that if you're leaving the country or the district for an extended period of time, you'll be able to rejoin once you're able to continue participating wherever you might be. But that's really because our teachers and their fellow students were not able to participate with those students to the same degree. And that placed a pretty significant burden on that class where those students were enrolled. So we will be going back to that 10-day, it's really a Parkway board guideline. We'll be returning to that next school year.
Thank you. The next question I will actually answer for you. This has to do with controlling what content students can access on Chromebooks as they are during school time or at home. And are there any parental control restrictions that are available for that? Right now, we are in the process of looking at implementation of additional monitoring and control tools. We're looking at that over the summer, and more details will come out this fall as to how that would work and what kind of systems we might use with that. Our next question has to do with structure again. What happens if we don't have sufficient enrollment for our virtual classes? Then how will that work for our students who want to be enrolled in virtual classes?
Well, thankfully, our initial information is showing that we should have sufficient enrollment at most of our grade levels and in most of our schools, but certainly a valid question. We have had to do over the years a ton of problem solving when certain classes might not fill. And I'm going to defer to Jennifer Stample on this because she has worked with our virtual learning for many, many years and had to deal with multiple issues where classes might only have a handful of students. So Dr. Stample, could you speak a little bit to that process?
Sure. So, we will be looking at those course requests and be looking to fill those classes that have adequate course requests. We also, though, will, if there is a class specifically, let's say that there were only 6 students, there is the Missouri Course Access Program, which is a program that is provided by the state of Missouri where Parkway would pay tuition for our students to take a course through a third-party provider. And so let's say, I'm making this up, but let's say calculus didn't have enough students at the high school level, we would be able to work to problem solve for that student. And so we are going to do our best to meet those requests for students, just knowing that, it kind of just depends on all of the students. And then once you build the schedule, whether or not it works, but we have plans in place for problem solving for our kids.
Thank you, Dr. Stanfield. This is a question about if a teacher is absent, will a substitute teacher be assigned to them for virtual learning? How will that work?
We are actually working on improving our substitute process right now. And so our hope is that we will be able to have substitute teachers in place for 1 day absence and beyond. Our current practice is that 1 to 3 days of an absence for a teacher is they are posting asynchronous work for students to work on. And we know that that can be difficult for our families, especially those with younger learners that kind of need that adult presence. Um, there are also some technical pieces with getting our substitutes set up on Zoom and Schoology and Infinite Campus and all those pieces. So we're working closely with technology to define and tighten our sub procedures. And we are going to be a bit more aggressive with having a sub in place when our virtual campus teachers are out.
Thank you. How are we going to handle supply pickups, and how will that, where will those locations be around the district?
We will continue to have supply pickups. I think some of that is going to be a bit enrollment dependent. It may be that we have a centralized location or maybe an area location versus individual schools. I'm thinking at the elementary level. We really are going to have to look at the number of students and just really the scope of the materials and supplies pickup and drop off. And then we will be able to kind of develop those plans and share those out in plenty of time for our families to make plans.
Another question we have, this one is specific to high school, but I think it can fit in with other grade levels. Will virtual students be able to come in person for music classes with their home high school teachers or their school teachers to enable performances, competitions, etc.?
Yes, we've been working with our fine arts staff as well as our fine arts coordinator, Jeff Lackey, to make that process available. And that's provided that the course is available at a time that works in the student schedule, that they're able to get to school, those sorts of things. So particularly if this happens in ensemble type classes, where there might be a course associated with a performance or competition. So if that class does work in the student schedule and they can attend during that time, then certainly they would be able to both enroll in their virtual classes, then come to school for that, the class associated with that ensemble.
Another question we have is around just the COVID statistics and the website that we have maintained over the course of COVID. Are we going to continue to keep that up for the next year? And will in-person students have the potential for quarantines and closures?
Another really fantastic question that if we could answer fully tonight, we would love to. But I think we all know that we just don't know what the health and safety situation will look like for next year. We have alerted our teachers, particularly at the secondary level, that if quarantines continue to be required into the fall, then that would be a situation that we have to address through students being able to access class through Zoom and those sorts of things, which we are very much trying to eliminate because we know it is not an ideal situation for either the teacher or the student. Certainly, I would say everyone on this call tonight hopes that that's not the case, hopes that we're not still dealing with quarantines, and hopes that we can shut down the dashboard because there's not really anything to report on it. Unfortunately, as we sit here today, we just don't have enough information and enough insight into what the future 3 to 4 months from now will look like to be able to answer that question. But I will say that if quarantines continue to be an issue and if COVID continues to be part of the reality that we're dealing with, then we would continue to maintain that dashboard so that the community can monitor what's happening within our district.
Thank you. Our next question is, will teachers continue teaching from their homes?
No, next year, all of our virtual campus teachers will teach from a physical Parkway location, and we are hopeful that we will actually be able to have some of those virtual campus teachers located together to support one another for collaborative teaming and really to think creatively about how to meet our students' needs in an online environment.
I know we answered this question earlier, but there's enough questions that have come out of it. In terms of curriculum between in-person and virtual learning, is there anything that a student would be missing by attending a virtual class as opposed to an in-person class?
The one thing that's always important to note is that, and I think we all know this from being through school and our own experiences, is that no two teachers teach exactly the same thing in exactly the same way on any given day. And that's in an in-person setting. So it's certainly, we can't say you're going to have 100% exactly the same thing that any teacher would have in the class next door, just because that's not the reality of how teaching works, because we know we're responding a lot of times to the questions and needs of our students. But what I can share is all of our students, whether they are learning virtually or in person, will have the same, what we call priority units, which means here are the key things that every student must learn. Those will be the same in person and virtual. So by going virtual, you will not miss out on any of those key things. The question becomes, outside of those key things, will they get exactly the same thing? And the answer is from class to class, that's going to vary even in an in-person setting, but we are going to ensure that regardless, virtual or in person, every student will be able to learn the priority things that students in Parkway need to learn, and that's what we refer to as our guaranteed curriculum. So to that degree, every student will be able to learn the guaranteed curriculum.
Thank you. So as we talked about scheduling, we talked about both block and traditional schedules. Will virtual campus use a combination of both of those, or will be one or the other?
Virtual campus will be mirroring the high school and middle school schedules. And at this time, and we have some teacher groups working on finalizing schedules, but it is looking like there will be the use of both traditional days and block days for the 21-22 school year.
Okay. This question is about vaccinations and has to do with, are we going to, as Parkway, are we going to release the percentage of staff that are vaccinated to the public in August?
In short, we're actually not allowed to because of health and privacy laws. We can't ask our teachers about their specific health setting or health conditions or health information. But we have been surveying our staff. So we do know that over 90% of our staff has said that they plan to be vaccinated. But currently, and that's really not a Parkway rule, that's what our governor said, is that in the state of Missouri, vaccinations will not be required. And so as a result, we cannot gather and publish that information in our state, but we continue to promote vaccination, to hope that all of our staff get vaccinated, and we continue to hear from our staff that the vast majority plan to receive the vaccination if they haven't already.
All right. For the high school, at the high school level specifically, and potentially at other levels, will virtual students will be required to attend in person for the purpose of standardized testing, ACTs, any of those group tests that we give?
In short, that would be the only time that a student would be required to come into our schools, is if the state does not provide us a virtual option. So in part this year, as many of you know, we are having to test our students, despite our advocacy with the state that we not be required to do that. We certainly have already invited and contacted all of our families to participate in state testing, which is to say, right now the state doesn't give us a virtual option, which means the only option is asking our families who are virtual to come into our buildings. If, however, in the future, the state says that we have a virtual option to participate in those exams, then we would absolutely offer that to our virtual campus families so that they didn't have to come in. But if the state continues their current approach, which is only allowing on-site testing, then that would be the one time during the school year that virtual campus students would be required to come into the building, is during state testing.
Thank you. can you talk about student participation in school clubs at their home school, or athletics, or any other activities that might be offered at their home school?
Yes, so students will be able to participate in activities and athletics. We plan to end our school day, especially at the high school level, a bit earlier to provide time for students to get to the high school for those events. And so we will continue to share information about virtual campus clubs and activities with students, but also we will make sure that our students are informed of those clubs and activities in their home schools as well.
Thank you. Currently, the spacing and social distancing in the younger elementary classes are not sufficient. Is there a plan to add in-person classes or teachers to reduce the number of students in each class?
And we know this has certainly been a concern, and we've tried to be transparent with parents that as we bring our students back into our schools, social distancing in many of our classrooms to the degree that we've come to expect is not always possible. For example, if we have 20 students in the classroom, that classroom only has a certain amount of square footage, and we can't spread students out further. So we will be continuing to distance them to the greatest degree possible, but we know that if we have students in an in-person setting in full classes, we know that 6 feet may not be possible, and parents just need to know that that's part of our reality. We'll continue with universal masking. In many of our classrooms, we see barriers, plastic barriers often between students or between teachers and the student, but social distancing is not always possible in our in-person settings.
For our teachers, are we going to require clear masks so that students may be able to read lips as well as listen to their teacher?
We've seen a number of strategies in our schools. We won't be requiring clear masks, though that has been used in areas, for example, as students are learning world languages, in choir classrooms, in special education settings where students need to see the instructor's mouth. Those have been something that we've employed in those settings. In other settings, we've seen some schools where they've employed microphones to make it easier for the students to hear teachers and those pieces. So we'll continue with those practices, but we don't currently have plans to have every teacher have to wear a clear face mask.
Thank you. Is virtual learning going to be a more permanent option, or is this just in response to COVID? Is virtual campus in response to COVID?
While virtual campus started as a response to COVID and the pandemic, we are planning to continue a full-time virtual learning option for our students through virtual campus for next year and subsequent years after that. We are finding that a number of our students are thriving in an online environment, and so this is just one additional choice that our families are provided to really meet the individual needs of their students.
We do have a question that is more about supplies, and for classes that have specific equipment or materials that are needed, will students that are in virtual campus have the same access to those experiences and those materials along the way?
So there will be some limitations. For example, I'm thinking of an industrial technology classroom with very large, heavy equipment, saws, or things like that, that likely are not in everyone's household of students in virtual campus. But what I will tell you is that our teacher teams, as well as our curriculum coordinators, who are really our true subject area specialists, are looking to identify materials and supplies that can be brought together and put into kits to send home with our virtual campus students so that those learning outcomes and really those curricular targets are able to be met in the home. So while it may not be that it's the exact same equipment, supplies, there will be opportunities, and we have lots of groups looking at how we can make that happen. The other thing I will say is that we have a number of, we've seen really a number of high quality online simulations and learning opportunities that also provide those kinds of opportunities for our students.
Thank you. One of the questions is kind of specific, but I think it has to do with the vaccines. If there is a family who has who is unsure about whether or not, currently, we don't know whether the vaccine is going to be available for students. And so they are struggling with what to choose right now in terms of their enrollment for fall. And so without that guidance from the state, if they wanted to switch during the summer based on what vaccines become available, how do they, what guidance can we give them?
Certainly understand that this is a tough decision for many, particularly not knowing what the future is going to hold. And we know that our reality is also unfortunate, which is we can't ensure that our students get adequate class sizes with the kinds of teachers they need if we don't know which settings students are going to be in. My guidance would be to select an in-person setting to ensure that you have a seat in a Parkway school. And we do have some options that we can problem solve through, that they are not Parkway options and they are not ideal if you need to remain in a virtual setting. Dr. Stanfield mentioned earlier the Missouri Course Access Program. We certainly can utilize that, but an example would be in Parkway's virtual campus, learning is synchronous. In many of the MOCAP classes, they're asynchronous. So for many of our families, that's less ideal, and we certainly understand that. But that is an option that we can leverage, whereas we can't guarantee that there will be a seat available in a Parkway classroom if you choose virtual and then want to switch back. So though we certainly understand and empathize with all families who say, I need to know that information, we also know the reality is we don't know that information. And at this point, as we sit here in April, we don't know when that information will become available. Which puts all of us in a difficult situation. So that would be my guidance to any family who's in that particular situation.
Dr. Beckner, I think we have lots of questions about shifting and switching after the year starts. Can you go, I know we talked about that, but it was right at the beginning. Can you reiterate our practice?
Yeah, certainly. Our goal is really to make sure that all students have high quality teachers in balanced classes. So an example would be is if we have 20 students in a particular grade level who are choosing to learn virtually, if during the year we then allow some of those students to switch back to in-person, let's say 15 of them say I want to switch back to in-person. What that would mean is we would not be able to maintain both class sizes that are balanced and appropriate for all of our students in an in-person setting and ensure that we have a teacher for our students who are in virtual campus. And that just puts everyone in a difficult position. And though many of us I know would love to have the flexibility to just move back and forth, we also know that you might be a parent who hasn't made a change, and then all of a sudden your student is in an overcrowded classroom, or your student is in a classroom where there's only 4 or 5 students. And then that's not an ideal situation for anyone, either the teacher in that situation or the classmates in that situation. So it's for that reason that we are asking families to make a decision now for the school year so that we can make sure that all students, whether they're a student in virtual, whether they're a student in person, that they can be sure that they're going to have a class with an excellent Parkway teacher that has a really good class size so that all students can learn at a high level throughout the school year.
And what if our situation with COVID changes and we go back, kind of go backwards? Does that change our approach?
We certainly built this approach on the assumption that people will be getting vaccinated and our health situation will improve. If we end up back in a situation like we were in over the winter, or a situation where things clearly deteriorate, then we will absolutely have to adjust our plans. because we have to be responsive to the situation as it exists at any given time. So that's something that we'll certainly be monitoring. We hope that all of our staff get vaccinated. We hope that sooner than later our students are able to get vaccinated. But of course, as I keep emphasizing, I'll say again, we wish we knew the future. We wish we knew exactly what things would look like from a health and safety standpoint come August, and we simply don't. If we did, we would be able to tell you, here's everything verbatim that you need to know. Unfortunately, we know, and we've all been through it, whether it was last spring or over the summer or over the winter, when the situation changed dramatically, we had to change and we had to adjust those plans. So we'll certainly be watching all of that. Our hope and our intention is that we won't have to, but we will have to be responsive should something significantly change.
Thank you for that clarification. One of the questions that has come up a few times has to do with the sequence of courses, especially at the high school level. And if a student is taking virtual, will they still be on track if they take a virtual science class as their freshman year? Will they still be able to be on track in their sophomore, junior, and senior year for their graduation and for the classes that they need if they switch back to a in-person or if they stay virtual?
Yes, so our curriculum coordinators really worked closely with all of our department leaders at each of our high schools to determine the course offerings for virtual campus. And part of that conversation was about scope and sequence. And so, for example, if there is a course in virtual campus that a student is in that is typically not offered, then the conversation would be, or the conversation was at that time, then at X school, they would move into this class. And so we have considered that, and that was really part of the thought process as we developed that virtual course or virtual campus course.
Thank you for that. One of the questions that has come up a few times has to do with Chromebooks and technology, and I can answer this. Basically, what do we do with our technology now if we are virtual and we are going to continue to be virtual? The answer is that more information is going to be coming. We are developing a plan to collect Chromebooks for the most part at the elementary level. We will be collecting those Chromebooks and checking out a new Chromebook or another Chromebook to a student at the beginning of the year. Different grade levels are going to be getting refreshed Chromebooks. Kindergarten, for instance, is scheduled to get new Chromebooks this fall. So more information is going to be coming from our technology department. Another question that we have has to do with specific to Mosaic's classes that were kind of missing at the middle school level this fall, but I think this has to do with all specialist classes. Are we going to be able to offer specialist classes that we would normally be offering in our schools? Will we be able to offer those virtually?
Yes.
So we will be reviewing those enrollment numbers once we have them, and then determine how we best meet the needs of all of our students in person and virtual, so that they can access, either learning courses or specialists. So those all will be taken into account, and that is really another reason why we're asking for your enrollment decisions now, so that we have adequate time to do that, so that we are prepared going into August.
Thank you. Next question has to do with specific to high school, but we have been in, are we switching back to semesters, or are we going into, going to keep our quarter system for both virtual and for in-person?
Yes, we'll be returning to the semester system for both our in-person and our virtual campus students.
Perfect, thank you. Will all virtual classes have scheduled breaks between classes to allow them to have time as a part of their schedule for time away from the screen to use the restroom, get a drink, so on and so forth?
Yes, we will be building in that time within and between learning blocks. Just as our high schools and our middle schools have passing time, those minutes will be given to our virtual campus learners, and our elementary learners will also be able to have some opportunities to be off screen. We know that that's incredibly important to our families, and it's important to us that they have breaks.
Great, thank you. Let me make sure. There are a number of different questions, but we've answered them in a variety of different ways. One of the things that I continue to see along the way here is just what will a class look like, specifically for elementary, but for all of them? What will students be doing? Will they be on their computer the entire time? Will there be activities that they are working with, small group, large group? How will that look?
We will continue to work with our teachers to, make decisions about the best way to design learning experiences for students that help them to achieve curricular goals. And so that said, there will be direct instruction and videos, very similar, synchronous instruction live where, teachers are talking, but also giving opportunities for students to engage and interact with one another. There will also be opportunities for those students to work asynchronously, and then in breakout rooms and in small groups. And then also being able, during that asynchronous time for teachers to reach out and be meeting one-on-one or in small groups with students to provide quality feedback, throughout their learning process. And so it really will be, we are hopeful, a blend, all of those things, and working with our teachers to really select the best kind of delivery model for what they're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. Can we talk, one of the questions has to do with materials from resources from the homeschools library. And as the coordinator for library, I can absolutely say we will be able to access, students will be able to check out materials from their library, as well as access digital resources from across the district. We will work with our technology, we will work with our teachers to manage that and really be sure that students have what they need. We do have a number of other questions. A lot of them are questions that are very specific. I want to ensure everyone, as we are winding down our time here, that these questions will be answered in an FAQ. And what I would encourage you to do is before, as we are winding down, be sure that you submit any last questions that you have to the Q&A, because what we will do is we will export that and be sure that we get those answered and up on the virtual campus website. We know that there are a lot of questions out there and that this is a really hard decision, but we also want to be cognizant of your time and recognizing that there's lots of scenarios that we are working through, and if we can help along the way, that's what we're here for. So please be sure that you get your questions in, and with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Stanfield and Dr. Beckner.
We both unmuted at the same time. We're eager to thank you for your time tonight. We just want you all to be assured that we have been working diligently throughout the year to learn from the virtual campus, since its inception in October, so that we can improve, to listen to parent feedback, to listen to our teachers who are really just doing amazing jobs so that we can really create the best online learning experience possible for your children. And we are absolutely here to help. All of our contact information is online, and do not ever hesitate to reach out. And thank you again, Dr. Beckner. I'll turn it over to you for a final conclusion.
Just want to reiterate what I said at the top. We know it's been a stressful and difficult year for many of our students and teachers, but you as parents and our whole community have come together to ensure that our students just keep being successful thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for your patience. And thank you for all you're putting into making sure that your kids are successful. We really, if you do choose virtual campus, we are incredibly excited for your child to engage in that new learning opportunity. And if they choose an in-person setting, we really look forward to seeing them back in person. So thank you again for being here this evening. And we are really grateful for all that you do for our kids.